Working with Crestron files. When working with SIMPL and Vision Tools ProE projects, there are a few special things you should be aware of to avoid corrupting your projects and working on them efficiently. Avoiding corruption. If you are changing branches, merging, or doing anything that overwrites the current state of files, this should be done with the application files not currently open in any Crestron applications. SIMPL Windows and Vision Tools ProE do not handle things being changed out from under them. You will likely cause yourself lots of problems if you don't follow this advice. Note that modern development tools like Visual Studio, for example, can accommodate changes like this and will either notify you or provide an option to reload the current version. This is definitely not the case for applications like SIMPL and VTP. Git attributes. We've already talked about how a simple SMW file is technically plain text. Treating it as a binary in Git attributes is necessary because the actual text is meaningless for comparison. When we were working with the plain text README file, you could see changes easily between versions and merge them together with branches. SIMPL doesn't work this way, and trying to merge an SMW file that isn't treated as binary is going to cause corruption. LFS. Well, you don't have to use Git LFS for your touch panel files. Once they start to become larger, it makes your repository much more efficient and compact on your machine. GitHub has a limitation on the amount of LFS storage you can use on the free plan, but I've found that the lowest paid plan of about $5 per month gives you a very reasonable amount of space. Releases. Tagging and creating releases are really the best way to generate files to load to a site. You may not have time to do this during a chaotic deployment, but at least make sure to locally commit the last changes that were loaded on site. Then remember to go back into your files later and create a tag and release for that version with the binaries that were loaded at that time. This can help maintain a structured record of code versions loaded on site. User modules. It is a good idea to include the simple compiled zip file into your release. This provides an extra assurance that all of the user modules that were used to compile the project are contained in the release. This is one area where Git with SIMPL creates a bit of a challenge, since user modules are not part of the project folder, and thus would not be contained in your repository. Another way to mitigate this is to copy your modules into the project folder, so that SIMPL will use the project's copy of the modules when you are loading, regardless of whether or not they are in your user database. Two-way sync. A lot of people are used to using backup systems that do two-way syncing, like Dropbox and OneDrive. This can cause corruption in your Crestron source files if changes are made by someone and automatically synced into your project folder. You should move away from reliance on two-way sync for your source code, especially when working with multiple programmers, as you are just asking for trouble down the road. You can still use Dropbox and OneDrive as an alternative backup. There is usually a way to set up your project folder for one-way sync from your computer to the cloud. Being one way, it will not arbitrarily pull from the cloud unless you manage this intentionally using Git. Autosave. You should be aware that SIMPL Windows and Vision Tools ProE both have an autosave mechanism. SIMPL creates a copy of the SMW file as .asv. If you ever need this, you can just rename it to .smw and open it up. This doesn't really impact Git at all, and .asv files should be ignored in your git ignore file. Vision Tools ProE is a bit different. Its autosave will overwrite the VTP file. Usually, this isn't much of a problem while you're working on developing a project. Where you will find some challenges is when you open an existing project for review or reference and change the visible subpages. If you have the application open for a few minutes, VTP will autosave the project file, and now Git will show an unstaged and uncommitted change. Since it is a binary file, you won't be able to see what the change actually is. You should get in the habit of discarding these changes in source tree right after you close the project, so that you don't confuse yourself later with what changed and if it should be committed. This will help keep your repository and change logs clean and up to date without confusion. Git stash. I have personally found the git stash command a very useful feature. Consider the scenario where you start developing a new feature for an existing project that is running on a site. The client calls with some problems, and you want to test your code to see if it is something that you did. What you can do is quickly stash the current changes you are working on in source tree. It lets you enter a message to describe the stash. This basically stores the uncommitted changes and returns you to the last commit where you can open up and review the code. If you do find bugs, you can note them so they can be changed in your working update. Stashes show up in source tree where you can right-click and either apply them to the current commit, this is basically bringing you back to where you were before the stash, or delete them entirely. If you are applying the stash, you probably also want to delete it. You can think of stashes as a temporary commit that doesn't clog up your commit history and allows easy reversal. Unfortunately, since simple files are binary, you won't be able to see what the stash really contains, but you can at least see which files are part of it.